Hello and welcome to episode 383 of Scarves Around the Funnel, the podcast dedicated to Scottish Premiership leaders, Heart of Midlothian. I'm Mark Donaldson, delighted to say Happy New Year to my co-host, Mr. Scott McIntosh. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been an interesting weekend. There's a trail of bodies that seem to be getting left at the feet of Hearts
Sinister.
just now in terms of these wins. It's just look, it's really strange, you know. I think there's the horror of all the sort of corpses that we seem to be creating just now with this good form, but then there's the sort of psychological tension that seems to be filling Tynecastle just now with each passing week. So I think we'll get a chance to touch on both of those themes at some stage tonight.
Yeah, indeed. I put something on the Scarves Around the Funnel Twitter account earlier. This is what happens when you put a near 50-year-old in charge of trying to generate something on Chat GPT. I simply said, can we have Derek McInnes as the Grim Reaper? And we ended up getting Massimo fucking Donati of Celtic from a few years. Joel Sked
Remember
messaged me,
him?
he's like, what's Donati? What's Donati doing coming back as the Grim Reaper? It is what it is. Honestly, I don't know what real and what is fake, but I do
Oh,
know we
it's
we we had quite the reaction, didn't we, to last week's podcast. You messaged me after we'd finished, and you're like, "I wonder how that'll go down." We had Stuart Lovell on. We had Stuart Lovell on, and we had a lot of good correspondence and a lot of "that's the worst fucking episode you have ever done." So this week we've invited Mickey Weir, Derek Riordan, and Gary O'Connor on, but they all had to say, unfortunately, we can't do it. So we've gone back to Livi, and we were looking for someone, maybe a Livi captain, like Stuart Lovell was, who could join us. And we've got him for the next 15 minutes with absolutely zero connections with Hibs, apart from the fact he kept putting the ball in the back of the Hibs net. It's our favourite. It's Mr. Ryan McGowan. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, guys. How are you? Good.
How are you?
Uh, been better.
Hmm.
Been better. Um, but yeah, I think our battle's not against the league leaders away from home. You know, we've got two big games coming up, um, both at home, which are ones that we have to really kind of keep an eye on and get some points from. So yeah, it's not been the best of seasons so far. But yeah, I think that we're bringing some boys in, and fingers crossed we can shoot up that table.
You scared the shit out of us in the second half on Saturday. What was that all about?
That's probably been our issue, is that we can't put a game together as such. You know, I thought first half we weren't great, but I thought Hearts were really good. And then second half, I thought we were much better, and Hearts had come off it a little bit. I think Scott touched on it, a little bit nervous, a little bit of tension in the air, and you know we've also got nothing to lose. As we're already losing the game, and started to sort of try and nick something from it. But yeah, it's it's hard when you're down the bottom, to try and get points and get things going. But we need to take the positives from that second half, like you said.
If that was you instead of Yengi with the header right at the end, would you have made a better effort than you did in the first half and scored?
I did get real nervous at that header in the first half. I actually thought at the time, I thought I was a lot further out, so I picked up the flight quite early, and I thought I'm just going to nod this back, and then the ball just kind of kept going away from me, and I could hear Shanklin right behind me, and I was thinking I need to get something onto this. And in my head, I thought it was kind of like straight down the middle. I was thinking Jerome should probably save it. And it wasn't until after the game that when the highlights come out, I thought, oh, that's actually a pretty good save.
A good header as well. Scotty,
It
what were
was.
you thinking when our former defender nearly put through his own goal?
it wasn't a yard out, so I was fairly confident it wasn't going
Yeah,
in. So
I know it was miles out.
aye, but 7 or 8 yards this time, so I think we were fine.
Did you have your celebration planned?
What if I scored no goal? Nah, I was thinking, see, towards the end when it was like last couple of corners, I felt like we were going to get a little chance or get a little something from it, and it did kind of cross my mind, being like, I could score here, you know.
Hmm.
And then what would I do? Um, but there's only like fleeting moments, that
You
you have
must have
that.
thought about it because it's against your team, but it's for the team that pays your wages. Would you have
Yeah,
done
like
a
I would
fingers
have.
to the lips or what?
No, I would have, especially the second half, been down to that end and like the corner bin there. I would have probably run towards the Livy fans, and celebrated because we'd got a draw. If it was especially that last minute one, snatching a draw away to the league leaders would be a huge result for us. So I would have celebrated, but I would have not been over the top as such. Like I think I've always said. I owe Hearts a lot. That they've gave me the platform to go on to have the career that I have, and gave me that very first opportunity. So I'd have never been disrespectful or shushed the fans or done anything like that. But yeah, I would have been delighted if I scored at the weekend, and I think that's probably why maybe Hearts fans liked me when I was at Hearts, was because every game I try and win, I try and give my all, and that's no different now that I'm at Livingston, even though I have a massive soft spot for Hearts.
Scott and I will look back at the Hearts Livy game shortly. We've got you for 10, 15 minutes or so. Scotty's, what do you want to ask Gowser as far as Saturday is concerned?
I think one of the things that interested me was, and this is something I feel like Hearts have struggled with all season. I think Derek McIntosh has been so keen on creating a team that aren't passive, that the consequence of that is that they don't really know how to sit on a lead and control a game. I didn't know if that was something that you can notice when you're playing against them in terms of, although we've got guys like Berry and Cammy that can recycle possession, because of the type of team that Derek McInnes has tried to create since the summer, we seem to sort of struggle with that. And I don't know whether there's an awareness that the fans aren't overly infused with that type of football as well. I don't know if that's something that you came across in terms of during that second half.
You know, without naming names, there was a lot of Hearts players that were telling each other, calm down.
Mm,
Let's get 5 or 6 passes. We don't need to score every time we go forward. And I think they got caught in that limbo of trying to kill the game off, trying to get that second goal, but also being a bit like, I think we maybe caught them on the counter once or twice. We gave them a couple of scares of being a bit like, we actually maybe need to sit back here and, you know, protect what we've got. And when that happens, you can kind of get the back four that are like, where he's gone, why are the fullbacks going forward? And then you got the strikers who then become further up the pitch and they're trying to do their combinations and are losing the ball because they have nowhere to lay it off to. And it becomes that little bit of a basketball game. And I felt that that's kind of what happened in the second half. And also with the way that they played in the first half, when it comes off, it looks really good. The one touch football,
mm,
and there was some combinations that they happened that was, as a defender, you're thinking, wow, this is, elite level stuff. It was actually really difficult to defend. Their movement, the speed of play, was really challenging to try and defend against. But that can so easily not come off. Does that make sense? That
yeah,
all it takes is half a yard, one touch behind the player, and if you've got everybody running forward, you've then got 4 or 5 out the team straight away, and we were then attacking onto a back four plus maybe Cami or Beningame who was in the middle, and we felt that we didn't do that in the first half. Probably the only opportunity in the first half was when Big Mo Silla went for that kind of big mazy run
Hmm.
yeah,
because the right back had pushed forward, and it leaves Benny and Cammy who have to track that whole way across. And something that we spoke about at half time was because they're both their fullbacks get so high and are involved, it then is up to Beningame and Devlin to come across and shut them off.
yeah,
But what happens is if you can then recycle it quickly, the middle of the pitch is wide open because those two have had to come across to get it. So unless the fullbacks filter in through the centre midfield or through the middle of the pitch, you can then pen Hearts in because you can get it out the other side. And then by the time that everyone regroups, you've got territory maybe 40 yards out. and then they have to then redo their press or try and get back out. And I felt like in the second half we did that really well, and we were able to sort of pen Hearts in for most of the second half.
When Hearts went to Livingston and Kizaridis scored late on to win at the end of August by 2 goals to 1, how did that performance compare with the performance on Saturday? Because you started both games.
I thought they were a lot better on Saturday. I felt like when we played him first, because Kazarides came off the bench and it was a little bit of an unknown. I think that was probably the game where everyone went, "Oh, like he is actually relatively good," and he definitely changed the game in Hearts' favour. The In the first game, and then it's probably the confidence and that, like I said, in that first half they had that real swagger to their play. Obviously, with the result in Glasgow, there was a feel good factor at the start of the game, and just felt that everyone was, really up against it. And it was something that we spoke about, having to try and keep it tight for that, first 5, 10, 15 minutes to try and get that nervous energy into the stadium. But yeah, definitely the confidence within near enough all the players, from being one that they are now 6 points in front is what the start of January. That does breed confidence and playing together. He hasn't made that many changes to the starting 11, so the players seem to know each other a lot better than they did in the first game for sure.
Did you sense a fragility though in the second half when your goalkeeper didn't really have too much to do?
Um, yes and no. I think they would have probably learned a lot from that performance, and it would have given them a lot of confidence. Obviously, tracking Hearts like I do, I think a lot of the players had Kilmarnock in the back of their minds of thinking we've not killed this game off. They're going to get a chance at the last minute. I'm going to chuck away another 2 points. Whereas sometimes results like at the weekend gives you that platform of like, well, do you know what? We actually didn't play that well and we didn't lose. So we can, I think, you can't always go out and win 2 or 3-0,
Hmm.
but you probably need to learn how to manage the game better. And like Scott said, being able to have players that slows the tempo down, doesn't make it into a sort of counter attack, counter attack, counter attack, which can be quite difficult for Hearts because they are so good on the counter attack. So I think sometimes they're a bit like, we'll fancy our chances here. Does leave them vulnerable at the back, but I think as the season goes, they're going to have to get used to defending a lead and defending it more comfortably.
One more from me, and then last one from Scott, and then we'll let you go. And thank you again for your time. Later on in this episode, I plan to have a conversation with Scott about that sounds like a headmaster. Scott and I will be chatting about his behaviour, about the atmosphere at Tynecastle, especially in the second half. Laurie Dunsar, Hearts TV commentator, and our colleague here at Scarves Around the Funnel mentioned it during commentary at the weekend. And I want to approach it from this angle with you, Gowser, because you've been in a Hearts jersey when the atmosphere has been brilliant, but you've also been in a Hearts jersey when the atmosphere has been like that. What did you make of the atmosphere in the second half from the stands? And as a professional footballer, is it up to you guys to generate something for the fans to cheer about and to make noise? Or sometimes could you do with a wee bit of help from the stands when things are going quiet?
I didn't I didn't think it was that bad. Obviously, like our group chats and a few of my friends and that were at the game complained about it, and I think because I'm not there every week, it is hard to judge on what is good and what was bad. But there's definitely a few times in the second half. I think there was a time when we were a little bit on top, and the Heart song came out, and it wasn't as if it was all doom and gloom and proper booing. I do feel like they tried to give the team a lift a couple of times, but then there's probably a nervous energy amongst them. That whether you like it or not, they are fans and players are in a alien position at the moment, and they're probably all unsure of what to do. Um, you know, they're not sure whether, I've seen some tweets of being like 6 points clear at the top of the league against bottom place team. We should be winning 3 or 4 nil. Whereas, last season they maybe would have been a lot more behind the players because those points were so valuable and they were struggling down the bottom of the league and what a win would do to them. So they're a little bit unsure of, should we be winning a little bit more comfortably because we are top of the league by 6 points? Or some of people are like, you still get the same 3 points for beating Livingston as you do beating St. Mirren as you do beating Celtic or Rangers. So I think it's probably a little bit of a collective effort. But yeah, it definitely helps as a player when the fans are, right behind you and doing everything. But it's also a player's responsibility to try and come up with something to get the crowd going. And there's enough players in the dressing room that know that and know how to do it. I just felt I didn't see it as a that big of a one way or the other. It wasn't as if our dressing room came off after the game being like, how bad were the crowd or how nervous were they? But again, I'm not there every single week to be able to judge it up against other kind of performances.
Scott, was the gist of this? It wasn't what Ryan was saying. It was the fact that nothing really happened. There wasn't much of an atmosphere because they didn't get on the. I thought there was patience in the second half because me, Ryan's played there. Even when Hearts have been struggling, the fans let themselves be heard as to what's going on. Were you aware in the stand of how different the atmosphere was in the second half because of the way that Livy were playing, and also because Hearts didn't have the lead that they probably deserved by more than one goal?
Yeah, a lot of it just comes down to nervousness, and it's just a fear. It's a fear of losing the position that we've found ourselves to be in. I think there's a lot of pressure that we're now playing on ourselves. I think if you go back to September, October time, I think most of us were in the position of just enjoy these moments. We didn't know how long it would last. Obviously, the sort of circus moved from Rangers to Celtic during that period, and I think it became more of a reality to us. Once we got into December, we got that result, I think, at Parkhead, and then the home win against Rangers, and I think it felt a little bit more real. And I think because of that, it's becoming harder to keep telling ourselves that this is something we should enjoy. We're now starting to think we're now into the second half of the season, and we're possibly thinking about the potential frustration and disappointment we would feel if we don't see this through. And that doesn't just come from internal pressure. I think there's an external pressure because more and more people are talking about us, whether that's the media in this country, whether that's the media down south. There is that little bit of external pressure as well. And I think people know that if it doesn't happen, there will be a lot of eyes on us saying, this was the chance. This was a chance for a Scottish club to do it and take advantage of Celtic and Rangers being in a season of regression. And I think we can argue at a later stage why we don't think that's true and why we think Hearts are just at the beginning of a certain journey. But you can understand why that observation would come around. So I think that's what's all leading to it. I think same with the players, just having to go through a learning curve. It's still that for the fans. I
Hmm.
think there is a lot of other factors that we could talk about later on in the episode, which I think leads to the overall impact on football crowds, just away from Hearts on Saturday. But I think that's what leads to most of it. It's just that fear. It's the same. I remember having a conversation with someone talking about teams that play for the back. And what I was trying to say to them is when it's your team doing it, you always struggle to enjoy it because you have that fear of what happens when that pass gets misplaced. I can quite easily sit and watch Motherwell week to week just now and fully enjoy it because I don't have that emotional attachment, which makes me think about the ramifications if Stephen Welsh misplaces a pass. When Hearts do that, you start to worry and you start to get concerned and anxious about it. So I think this all plays a part in it. A lot of it's just
Hmm.
fear. I don't think the fans are taking any joy and getting frustrated, and that may be coming across during games. I just think it's almost a reaction that you just can't control, and it's just hopefully it's something that can maybe be not fixed, but maybe worked on. But I think that's going to take a concerted effort from all three or three and a half stands, and I don't think that's an easy thing because I still think there's teething issues with the ultras and a few other things, which, like I say, we might touch on later on in the episode.
But Mark, you also make a really good point. There wasn't much in the game. You know, it like
Mhm.
Hearts didn't really create anything to even get excited about. I think
Mhm.
from from memory, I'm not even sure they really had they maybe had a couple of half chances, or
Nothing much in the second
One
half.
maybe a
deflected shot, I think, but
Yeah, there
I
wasn't
think that
much
was
at
went out
about
for
all.
a corner.
Mhm.
But sometimes you play games throughout the season where it's just a bit like, ugh, you know,
Yeah.
take the 1-0 and move on. But if you're comparing the first half to the second half, I think the first half was really good atmosphere, but the players were playing well,
Mhm.
you know. And then the second half was just probably a little bit flat because we Livingston played well and we were a little bit on top, and there wasn't even like I'm trying to think of something like Kizarides gets the ball maybe in his defensive half and nutmegs someone and beats a couple of players and gets up the pitch and wins a free kick, and that gives everybody a big lift. We actually did really well at nullifying that and not allowing that to happen. So there wasn't really even a sniff for the fans to get excited about for 5, 10 minutes. And um, probably more credit to us than to the fans.
Hugely. There's no fear of consequence when you're playing like Hearts did in the first half. Everyone wants the ball. Give
Hmm.
me a piece of this. I fancy. I think I can score here. I want the ball as well. And the fans react to that. And it's a good point you make as well because you don't want to be that person that stands up and go, "Come on, give us an H," and everyone's like, "Sit the fuck down."
Yeah.
We spoke a couple of months ago. And I made the point. I just don't want us come the end of the season to kind of look at our own selves, go to the games and go, we could have done better. This is by no means a criticism of Hearts fans because a lot of it is new, but there's a nervousness that can stretch to the players, and that fear of consequence may come in if there's not an atmosphere when a player's like, oh, okay, I'm maybe not going to be as advant, sorry, as kind of I'm not going to try and do something that I did in the first half for fear of failure. So then you get someone playing it sideways or backwards as well. Again, that's credit to Livingston. But the nervousness we spoke about, remember 85, 86 penultimate game of the season, Hearts Clydebank. Everyone's like, oh, they're rubbish. We'll smash them. They're at the bottom of the table. It was 1-0 and it was nervy. But that's the
There's
way
a
it is.
there's an element to this atmosphere that's been with not just the club but with football in general for a while now. Like football's moved on. I think the I think the issue is that for a lot of us who are old enough to remember, we maybe aren't accepting or acknowledging the fact that the sport itself has moved from a very sort of working class sport where it was all about the tribalism and there was a lot of dark humour in what was said and sung at football up until the last 10, 15 years. It has moved into more of a middle class sport. There is now more hospitality spaces getting sold. The ticket prices do lead to football fans becoming more of an audience rather than a football crowd. And I think all these things play a part. I think it's not just an issue on Saturday. It's not just an issue with Hearts. It's a football and atmosphere issue in this country. And you could go back 20, 30, 35 years as to when this started and why it started. But there is an acknowledgement piece as to why we're here. And again, that's something that needs to be probably just accepted and now find a an alternative to it. I think the ultras are the alternative. I think there's logistical reasons as to why they can't really expand and build on what they've done up to this point. I think where they've been placed, where do you go from there? I don't quite see the
Mhm.
shift from there, given the hospitality spaces are directly above them and it's still basically the family stand. So I think that's something that maybe the Ultras Foundation of Hearts and the club are going to have to maybe look at during the summer because I think that's a potential for growth in the atmosphere. But I think the Ultras probably feel like they're stagnating just now because I don't think they're getting a lot of support for the club and from some other fans. I think there's a bit of a snobbery towards the Ultras from some sections of the support as well. And again, whether that's a generational thing, I don't know, but I feel like they've done a really good job up to this point, but I do feel like they've hit a bit of a brick wall because there's no real appetite from the club to really expand on what they've done with them up to this point. And that includes things like the pooling system with the tifos and that. There's just a few things that I think if the ultras were given a bit more support, it would help in this run in to the end of the season. And that's not just in the ground. That could be fans trying to organise little rallies and fans marching to the stadium together. It doesn't always have to be the ultras. They're obviously a good driving force for that. But there's maybe just a few things that the fans need to take a bit of responsibility and ownership over between now and the end of the season to make sure that when we get into the game, we're in the game going into a good sort of feeling of momentum as fans. We're not just traipsing in out the pub at 5-3 and just sort of finding our seats. We're maybe already finding our voice before the game even starts, and hopefully that can then transfer onto the players and move them as well.
It is
Last
a
one
good,
for
sorry, it is a
sorry,
good point
Gavin.
that you make about
I'm
football.
trying to get you out of here and you keep talking.
I know, but football has changed in terms of even the fans in the last, 10, 15 years. Like I remember playing at Tynecastle for Hearts, and it was like that poisonous hatred atmosphere, you know, like that section N. Like if you used to do a tackle in front of there, you'd feel like 100 foot tall, and that you'd look in there, and there was just angry men like shouting and hurling abuse at the opposition, and looking for a fight. It was just a real about it. Football fan, you don't have that. You don't like even Easter Road. You used to go to Easter Road and you used to get absolute dogs abuse, and it'd be that real like poisonous atmosphere. That's kind of it's not really a thing anymore at
It's
football.
like
Like what
American
Scott said,
sports.
it kind of feels like it just doesn't have that. And there's only certain games that brings that out. Derbies or
Yeah, it still
um,
exists.
it still exists, but it doesn't exist to the point that it used to. It used to be every game, I felt,
Mm.
especially even when I was a young boy and on the bench. You're at away grounds and you just knew you were going to get dogs abuse. You knew that there was going to be at least 10, 15, 20 people shouting at you. Whereas now it's two, maybe three, if you're lucky, that give you a little bit of abuse.
5 days from now, final question. If Livy win the two games that they've got upcoming, you're off the bottom of the table. How big's this week? St Mirren at home midweek, Killy at home this weekend for
Yeah,
Livy.
it's huge. They're two games that we need to get maximum points from really. But we just have to kind of look at teams in and around us. If you look at Dundee, we played them maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, and it was really tight in terms of points difference. And then they've won 3 games in a week, and they've shot up to 22 points and sitting well clear of us at the bottom of the league. So we believe that. We have enough in the dressing room to go and put those kind of performances and get those results. And that's just something that we're going to have to do because we're running out of games, and we have to turn this around quick smart.
We really appreciate your time. Ryan, good
All
luck
right.
on
Thank you very much.
Tuesday
Been a
and good
pleasure.
luck at the weekend. Thank you to Ryan McGowan. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest, Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. So, Scott McIntosh, Heart of Midlothian 1, Livingston nil. I think the views of that Livingston captain will be better taken in by Heart supporters than last time out, and that Livingston former captain. Um, Saturday, what did we make of it overall? Because it's now Monday, time you're listening to this. It'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, later in the week. Um, Biggest thing is, as a friend of mine, Neil Hunter, said, we're further clear with one more game played than we were before kickoff. And a win's a win. It's a different story if Tete Yengi scores the late header. And you can understand why people are like, it's just, it should have made life easier for ourselves. We won the game. We're 6 points clear. It's not a bad place to be, is it?
No, look, we're a step closer to the finishing line, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I think as we enter into that second half of the season, it's not all about performances and momentum because I think that's what's got us to this stage. It's having good performances and building, some momentum to take us to the top of the pile. I think it's now about how we just manage to just get us from this stage to April, May time and still be in a position where we're still fighting or at least at the top of the league come the end of the season or come the split. There was aspects to the second half where Livingston created a couple of good chances. It wasn't that we were on the ropes per se. I think Ryan perfectly sort of described it when he talked about that sort of basketball scenario. It was quite back and forth without there being a lot of goal mouth action. And again, as I alluded to, I think that is a bit of a consequence to what Hearts fans have craved from a Hearts team. I think we've talked about this, whether it be under Robbie Neilson, Stephen Naismith, Neil Critchley, other managers. We have talked about that DNA of a Hearts team that I think a lot of Hearts fans like, and it's not passive football. It's not about a manager coming out after a game and saying we controlled the game, so it's fine that we dropped points. We had 70% of the game, so it's fine that we lost the goal or didn't win the game. I think there's an element to this way that we play that does have a risk factor to it, and I think Saturday's a good example of that. But I think it brings along more reward than risk. So although Saturday was an example of a game where we didn't quite finish it off when we should have done, and that obviously leaves us in a position where we're relying on, our keeper and our centre halves to keep us in the lead. But most people would then say that's the sign of champions. You get normally when Celtic or Rangers win the league, the red top media normally put out a five most pivotal games that won Celtic the title in that. And you tend to find that in those 5 games, there's the odd 1-0 in there against a team in the same league. There's a 1-0 against a Motherwell or a Hearts or a Livingston or that where it wasn't pretty, but it highlighted the steel and the durability of the defensive part of the team, or the goalkeeper being, effective, or someone that you can rely upon. So I think there still is positives to take out of it, even if the second half performance wasn't quite matching what we'd achieved in the first half. But it's one of those things, like you say, and like Neil said to you, we're another 3 points better off than we were on Saturday, and I'm now getting closer to thinking not about there being 18 games left of the season, but it's more about the next 13 games. It's where do we need to be going into the split? I think, given how historically awful we are post split, I think we probably need to be 9 points clear, just to give ourselves that breathing space, knowing that the other teams can easily slit each other's throat during that final run-in. So where are we now? We're 6 points clear. So what we really need to do over the next 13 games is try and be 3 points better off than our closest rivals. Now, I think we're in a position where we can do that. And I think when you start thinking about it that way, you can hopefully start to see it as a reality. I know there's going to be talk again because Celtic have made another move. They've obviously replaced Nancy with bringing in Martin O'Neill this evening, and that's all fine and well. But I think ultimately we're not going to really know until the end of January just really how strong Celtic and Rangers are going to be for this running, because I think it comes down more to the recruitment than it does who's in charge of them just now.
If you're poor after the split, just win the league before the split. It's simple. It's not
Well,
a difficult
it'd be
concept.
really nice to go into the split 16 points clear, but I just can't see it. So yeah, I think you've got to be 9. I think you've got to try and be 9. Uh, and I think that'd be a really good position to be in. So again, when you consider we've got 13 games between now and the split, that should be the focus now for the fans, is looking at that and going, right, are we going to get the odd bump in the road like the Derby? We probably will, because as we talked about last week, there's a lot about this squad that's ahead of schedule. Again, would we have looked at that squad at the beginning of the season and looked at a title challenging squad? We probably wouldn't have done. So I think there still has to be a bit of an acceptance of us possibly punching above our own weight just now. And because of that, we should try and give a little bit more patience to the players when they're going through those little awkward spells during games.
But there'll also be bumps in the road for Rangers and for Celtic and for
And I
Motherwell
think
and for
that'll
Hibs.
start really soon. Rangers have got 2 games against Aberdeen, and hopefully that not new manager bounce, but just not having Jimmy Tilleen there bounce will hopefully help with that. So yeah, there's you could, and I'm sure they'll do the same when they look at our fixtures. But you could look at who Celtic and Rangers have got over the coming weeks, and you can find little reasons as to why those fixtures could be difficult for them.
What did you make of the lineup and the formation selected by Derek McIntosh against Livy?
Yeah, I like the lineup. The formation, once we can get sort of Chesnokov up to speed, I know McInnes was very high in praise for Kajota, saying that he's getting closer, he maybe starting a game as well. I'd like to see us get to that sort of 4-2-4 a little bit quicker. I think we, as you being out the picture, the 3 men in midfield is fine, and I think Magnuson is a very willing sort of advanced midfielder. But as we've kind of seen from him so far, he's not overly the most composed player in the box, even if he is very willing to get involved and sort of support. So I think once we can get that that right winger slot sort of tied down, I would like to see us go to a 4-2-4 because I also think it gets the best out of Braga being in a more central position alongside Shankland. I think Braga's form has dipped a little bit,
I thought
being
it was
asked
really
to
good
sort of
first half and really poor second half. It was
uh,
weird.
aye, but just generally speaking over the last
Yeah,
3 or
that's
4
fair.
games, I think pulling out wide hasn't been to his liking. Even although I think he's played quite a lot there when he's played over in Norway, I can't say it's been his best position when he's played for Hearts up until this point. So I would like to see us get to that 4-2-4. But generally speaking, quite happy with the lineup. Having 2 attacking fullbacks at home to Livingston, I felt was vital as well. And and yeah, it was a good debut for Altena. So that was a real big positive as well. And like I said earlier, when we did need them, our centre halves and our goalkeeper came up trumps for us as well.
Well, Altona got the assist for Craig Halkett's super header. But there was also once in the first half where he continued his run down the right-hand side. And it was like a total dichotomy from when Hearts played Motherwell when we were speaking about that at Fir Park with Forrester in the 0-0 game under Critchley and then McEntee more recently. We just finally to have a bombarding fullback forward. He took the touch, he got to the byline. And he actually, it wasn't just played in. He tried to pick someone out and he cut it back, and we had a chance that went a begging. I watched that game back in full, and I normally only do that if I've missed the game and I want to talk about it, so I want to see it. I was really impressed by us in the first half. That's as good as I think we've played in a 45 minutes. It's certainly up there all season. I thought we were outstanding. We just couldn't find a way past Prior, or Magnuson just couldn't find a way into the back of there because he could have had a couple as well. Really impressed by the first half.
Yeah, and I think Altera was a huge part for that.
He
I think
was.
we just talked last week about why we'd struggled at Easter Road, and one of them was this over reliance on the left hand side. Obviously, teams were then able to double up on Kazidis as well, so being able to find an alternative down the right was going to be imperative to us moving on as a team this season. And I think the first signs of the for Altena are positive. Again, you're probably going to need to see him being challenged a little bit more defensively to know whether he's going to be an upgrade on maybe Steinvender as a right back or a flat back four in a more defensive minded system. But going forward, he was really good. What I really liked about him was, and this is one of my biggest bugbears about football teams in general, is one of the biggest things that can kill off momentum in a football team is the basics from your back four. So what I mean by that is your centre halves not playing the ball in front of the other centre half, just playing it slightly behind them, or a centre half playing a ball to a fullback who doesn't open his body up, but in turn takes a touch, which brings him closer to having to just play the ball back to the centre half and keep it safe. You've seen it quite a bit the last few years. I felt Natty Atkinson was really bad for that. Natty Atkinson's first touch was just never there. He never opened his body up when he took the ball in. I could see Altena doing the right thing, getting the basics right, opening his body up and allowing him the chance to be able to either drive forward or find a progressive pass. So everything was really good about him. Like you say, the ball for Halkett, it's a decent ball. I think ultimately it's just a brilliant header. I mean,
Yeah.
Halkett, you can see why Halkett was a striker, at trade when he was a youngster. Because I mean, most of his goals are really good goals, really good finishes, and that was another one. And that takes him another goal closer to the 10 that I think Joel had predicted for him at the start of the season. So he's only
He
four
did.
away for that now. I'm pretty confident he'll probably get there. To be fair, so yeah, really good debut. Like I say, will he play every week? Don't know yet. I think there still might be circumstances where a Steinvender will maybe still be something that McInnes wants to plump for, because we know what McInnes is like when it comes to centre halves playing at fullback. But in terms of these types of fixtures where we've got the bulk of the game in front of us, I think he's a really good option going on that first impression.
If I gave you the choice to strengthen one position at Hearts, we've got our right back now. Would you go for a striker that Shanklin could play with or play off? Or would you go for an attacking midfielder that might convert the chances that Thomas Magnuson couldn't at the weekend? You're only allowed one. What's more important?
Probably the striker. Because I think if you look at it in one respect, we know that Aju will hopefully come back end of January, start of February, and he will give us another option, another dimension, hopefully from the centre of the midfield or just coming in off the left-hand side. I think when you're in a circumstance like Saturday where, and Ryan touched upon this, when that one touch stuff stops working for you, but the game's still a bit of a basketball game,
Hmm.
what I would really like to see have as an alternative option for Hearts is someone that you could maybe either bring off the bench or start who can maybe just hold the ball in and allow the, because Ryan was touching on that where defensively you start to maybe retreat back 5 or 10 yards when you're a goal up, but you've got those forward players who still want to press on the ball, and it creates this big gap, which means that it's harder for the midfielders and the fullbacks to support the forward players as quickly as they did in the first half. Having a target man like striker in that scenario would allow us the chance to maybe, give us a bit of time on the ball, give a few players a bit of a bit of breathing space as well, and just allow us to keep the ball in the opposition half a little bit more. Plus, I do think football fans in Scotland generally, and I think Hearts fans have been like this in the past, they do take well to a good old-fashioned battering ram up
Hmm.
front. So I think having somebody like that just now would be a good alternative option for us than a creative midfielder.
Just to wrap up the game and to touch upon something Ryan said earlier, and he said he wasn't naming names, but he did say there were a few players that were just saying to each other, "Calm down, just take your time a wee bit more." And that goes in with what Derek McInnes said. Here's his quotes after the game against Livingston. In the first half, we looked like a team who deserved to be top of the league. And no one could argue with that whatsoever. Some of our play was brilliant and free flowing. But he also said it's a reminder to the players that there's a consequence for every rushed pass when you're in transition, every missed chance, and every time you don't get the second goal. We never looked settled in that second half. We still had some movements, but we looked a bit rushed. But in fairness to the players, there may be something in their head from the Kilmarnock game. Is one enough? Sometimes one is enough. I'd have liked to have enjoyed the second half a wee bit more, but in professional football, the enjoyment comes from winning. We all wake up in the morning, look at the league table, and say, job well done, and credit to the players for that. So, based on those comments and based on what Ryan was saying, some of the Hearts players were saying to each other, it's probably the more experienced players saying to some of the less experienced
I
players
can
what they were
imagine
saying.
Shanklin saying it towards Braga and
Probably.
Kazanidas in that second
Well,
half.
yeah, and you've got to think where Geyser was and what position he is in the
Yeah,
park at the
I
back. So
can
the
imagine
closest players,
Shanklin was who you probably heard more so than anyone. Yeah.
probably, yeah, because he's very vocal. Um, can we learn something straight away to put into practice if we do find ourselves a goal up with time running out at Dens Park on Sunday?
I don't know because I just think the makeup of this team is that they're at their best when we're in transition. I've said this, we sort of touched upon this after the Hibs game about we are a team that actually don't mind the other team having the ball. So I still think against the bottom six sides, I still think you're going to see these little spells where we just don't quite control the game to the extent that you would normally see a team at our standing in the table do against the bottom six side. And again, that comes with the reward of that style of play. I think you've seen the reward in a lot of our bigger games, beating the Old Firm twice, home and away, beating Aberdeen and Hibs at home. I think you've seen that having that sort of almost basketball mentality, just being direct and going back and forth, it's brought us a lot of joy and success in bigger fixtures. But there's still little teething problems in those games against the likes of Livingston and potentially Dundee at the weekend, where when you just want someone to maybe just put their foot on the ball, we've maybe just not. I don't think Derek McIntosh drums it into them, but I think we're as a team we're quite aware that we want to be something a little bit different, and we've maybe just not quite found that balance yet.
I see you've adopted the Michael Stewart cough into your podcasting.
Oh, it's hellish. I know. I know.
You're talking about, just finally on this one. You're talking there about we're at our best in transition. We weren't in transition at the weekend. We were swashbuckling. We were playing freestyle. We were just getting forward. We were playing without consequence. And I'd settle for another first half like that because I'm pretty sure. I mean, that it was a decent enough chance. I wouldn't say it was a brilliant chance for Halkett. We had far better chances. I think we scored two, three, maybe four goals. If we have an exact copy of that first half in any half now between now and the end of the season, I think we score more goals than we do. It's when we have that one goal lead and that nervousness comes in. And do you know what, Scott? It might not be a bad thing that Sunday's away from home at Dens Park because it's those that have got the most points as far as loyalty is concerned that get the tickets for these games. You've been to most away games this season. There's never a complaint about the away atmosphere when they go to watch Hearts, is there?
No, and that's normally because there's maybe a little bit more alcohol consumed on away trips. So yeah, but look, I do think that home games can come across a little bit more routine, can't they? And not everyone goes for a swift half or pint before the game when it's a home game. They're maybe taking their kids, they're maybe been working beforehand. The away games have a bit more novelty to them. You're going to a ground you only go to twice a season and that. You have a few drinks with your friends and that. I do think that can, all those sorts of factors can help differentiate the difference in an atmosphere from a home to an away game. And again, I think Ryan touched on this. I think the fans were still patient at the weekend. There's just that little bit of tension. And look, I'm as bad as anyone else for that sort of stuff. So don't take this as me talking down to anyone, because I'm just as bad as the next person. And look, I would be the last person to just stand up there and go, give me an H. Because I'd be like Ryan there. I'd be thinking in my head, nobody's going to fucking follow this on for me. So I'm just going to, because I know I've got the likes of you and Murray, and that's sitting a few rows behind me, I'll probably just get told to shut up and sit down. So I do think that the away games do help with that a little bit. But again, another positive for the weekend is it's been a learning curve, but a learning curve in a fixture that we've still ultimately won, and we've came out of
Sure.
that weekend in a stronger position than where we were before it. So if that's the worst we've got to deal with just now, I'd take that between now and the end of the season, even if the games themselves were maybe fraught with tension.
Put it this way, if you were offered the chance for a do-over in a bid to try and score more goals, or just take the 3 points and run, I'm taking the 3 points.
Yeah. Especially our goal difference just now. I mean, our goal difference is very healthy compared to
Plus
our
9 over
rivals.
Celtic and Rangers.
Yeah, so
So
I
yeah,
mean, we're in a position just now where we're six, you know, close to 7 points ahead of them. You know, it gets to that stage where even winning games won't necessarily mean that they overtake us. So, yeah, I think just now we've been quite efficient in front of goal on the most part. Uh, Saturday, I think, was an occasion where the ball kept on dropping to a Magnuson or a Harry Milne and that, and I think there's a few times where you would have just liked it to have just felt to Lauren Shanklin instead. Hopefully at the weekend that's what's happening. But it is another game where we will see a lot of the ball, so I think the players do need to learn that the game doesn't need to be won in the opening 45. They can take their time, knowing that we're a team that are very fit. We've scored lots of goals in the last 10 or 15 minutes so far this season, so it's something that Derek McIntosh, I hope, will be reminding them of. We've been a team that have had to leave it late at times, but that's okay. You know, as long as
Mhm.
we get the job done, doesn't matter whether it's done in the 10th or the 90th minute. It'd be easier for supporters if we were 2 or 3-0 up at half time, but you've just got to accept that it's not always going to be that way. So, yeah, I think the players just need to remind themselves of that.
You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald's Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Anybody that went to bed on Friday and didn't wake up until you were listening to this, you've missed quite a lot in the world of football. Celtic, goodness me. Nancy's gone, Tidsdale's gone, O'Neill's back with the crew that he had the last time. How does that affect Hearts, Scott McIntosh?
Don't know. I was trying to think of that film 28 Days Later where Cillian Murphy sort of wakes up for that coma. And I'm thinking, if that had happened to him recently, that character, he would have woke up just thinking, oh, Martin O'Neill's still Celtic boss. Like, nothing's changed. And it's like, so much has happened in such a condensed period of time. And it's
Martin
been
O'Neill was
crazy.
in charge. Martin O'Neill was in charge for longer in his first spell in charge on a
Yeah,
temporary basis than Wilfred Nancy was. Now
I know.
Martin's back.
Uh,
Good for Hearts or not?
Again, it's the recruitment side. I think you could see that Martin O'Neill was struggling to get a tune out of Celtic, even towards the end of that run. I think there was the last minute goal against St Mirren. There was the 1-0 home win against Dundee. I think he would have maybe dropped points in that running. Obviously not to the same extent as Wilfred Nancy, because he wouldn't have been as cavalier and stubborn with his philosophy as Nancy was. But I do think there's still a question mark about, well, how do Celtic conduct their business now? Who's in charge of that? Tisdale's away, Doctor Football or whatever he called himself. Uh, Nancy's away as well. So who's going to be responsible for the recruitment between now and the 31st of January? So I do think Celtic still have an issue with that. And I think you probably don't know just how much of a challenge they're going to put over the coming months until you see where they're able to strengthen. Because I think, regardless of whether they stick with what Nancy's been doing or they go back to a more traditional 4-3-3 under O'Neill, they're still struggling in certain areas. You know, you're still whether Anthony Ralston's playing right centre back or right back, he's still having to play for Celtic just now. You know, the same with certain other players. I mean, some of those players look like they've checked out. Rio Hatate came on at the weekend there. He's a tremendously gifted player, but he looked checked out. He just looked like he didn't want it to be there. It looked like he'd spat the dummy out, whether that's because he'd been dropped or not, I don't know. And you just don't know how much of an impact this 8 game spell have had on the confidence of some of these players who, albeit I think O'Neill and Maloney and that had done a decent job picking up after Rodgers had resigned. But yeah, look, it would be nice for them to have kept Wilfred Nancy, but it is what it is, and we've just got to concentrate on ourselves. The good thing is, it's in our hands whether we win this league or not. So as long as we concentrate on ourselves and remain consistent, then ultimately does it matter too much what Celtic and Rangers are doing.
At just after 5 o'clock on Saturday, a plane owned by KLM, KL 927 from Amsterdam, which was due to arrive around about 1:15, 1:30, but had a 4 hour and 16-minute delay. It was also a connection that was meant to take place the day before, but another connection didn't happen. That's why it was an overnight in the Schiphol airport region for Islam Chesnokov. Never has the Flighty app or Flight Aware or whatever been so eagerly checked for a player that seems to have, the saga of him joining Hearts seems to have gone on forever. He is here. He has had his permit for employment in the United Kingdom, rubber stamped and approved. But he's also not played since he was in action for his country and for his former club, Tobol, about a couple of months ago. So realistically, once everything is done and he's paraded and he chats with Hearts TV this week and he is available for the trip to Dundee, obviously he's not going to start. Realistically, when are we talking about a player who hasn't played for a couple of months being an integral part of Derek McInnes's potential selection plans?
It's a difficult one because there's already a groundswell of expectation around the player because it's a position that we've struggled with so far this season. I think people want him to come in and hit the ground running. I think Derek McInnes will be mindful of that, but I think he'll also be mindful of the fact that if you don't see anything of him, that sort of enthusiasm might turn to a bit of frustration amongst the support. So I think for at least for the next couple of games, I think you'll see him on the bench. And if we're in a position where we can bring him on for 10, 15 minutes, I think they'll try and do that. Ultimately, though, the only way players get match fit is by playing games. So they can train as long as they want. They can train Monday to Friday for weeks and months. They don't get that sharpness until they play games. So again, it's a bit of a balancing act. I'm hopeful that either through his own initiative or through help from the club, there's maybe been some form of individual training regime that he's managed to, you know, take on the last couple of months
Not the
just to keep
David
him ticking
Vanacek
over.
diet.
Well, exactly. Don't go to, was it the Maldives or Thailand or something? He went for 2 months and basically just ate lobster, I think.
Not
So
bad though, is it?
I mean, aye,
Maybe not
I
if you're a
don't think
professional footballer.
I don't think it'll be that sort of diet anyway. But yeah, I think as long as he's been ticking over, ultimately he needs to play games to get himself fit and fighting fit and in a position where he's actually going to be productive and an asset for us over the next few months. So I think that the first couple of weeks you'll certainly see him on the bench with a view to maybe giving him the odd few minutes. Let's say we're 2 or 3 up at the weekend. That there's an opportunity, maybe give him 10, 15 minutes and just get him to sample the atmosphere and just get a few minutes in his legs. But yeah, I think because it's a transfer we've known about since the summer, it's a position that we're just dying to see getting filled by somebody, whether it's Chesnokov or whether it's Kazakh who's already there.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that means that there'll be a bit of pressure coming for the fans, but McInnes is experienced enough to know when somebody will be ready. I think you can see that with how there's been certain players that he's wanted to bring in straight away. I mean, look at Altena, that was 1 or 2 training sessions, and he trusted him to come in straight away. As you was somebody who he wanted to put in for the start. But there's been others like Kurjota, Magnuson to a lesser extent, where he's maybe thought, I'll just drip feed you guys into the squad and into the starting 11. So I think he's in the best place possible to try and make that observation. And it'll just be interesting to see over the next week or two. But I do think we'll do a bit more business. I'm hoping it'll be that striker that I'm hoping, just that little alternative option up front that I'm hoping we go for. But apart from that, I think it's just about maybe try to shift 2, 3, 4 maybe out the door, whether that be loan deals or permanent, just to try and trim on the squad a little bit.
And that's the thing. There might be a case where one or two potential signings only come in if one or two current players exit the football club. We are still at the beginning of the transfer window in January as opposed to the end. I think most of Hearts' business will probably be done before the last week is over. But again, Hearts have certain players that have got a decent contract, don't have to go anywhere unless they're happy with the potential move. So that remains to be seen. We will end shortly by looking ahead to the Dundee game. But while I've got Scott here, we have 6 games to go through and analyze and give a marking to between A and D. We've already done it for the first 14 from Hearts Aberdeen on day one through to Motherwell against Celtic. We have a mixture of A's, B's, and C's so far, including a D plus for the first hour against Motherwell in the 3-all draw. So let's get Scott's take on Hearts against Kilmarnock at Tynecastle. We're looking here at the performance, not the result. What was the performance like, and what are you giving that?
Yeah, that's a what C minus D plus. Wasn't a great performance. They really struggled. Even the goal we got that evening, it was kind of almost a bit of luck how it sort of fell into Shankland's path, albeit it's a good finish. And then we sort of retreated those 5, 10 yards and really struggled to see the game out. And although Kilmarnock scored in the last minute, the goal had been coming for about 5, 10 minutes leading up to that point. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for a D plus for that one.
Okay, I was going to take the other one, so I'll take C minus. Celtic 1, Hearts 2. Performance.
So that performance is probably an A minus. Uh, so if you think about how McInnes probably foresaw the the shape of that match going, it's probably pretty much how he would have wanted it to have went in terms of Hearts maybe sitting in, being a bit more conservative the opening half an hour, maybe trying to work out what Celtic were going to do under a new manager, and then maybe making the necessary tweaks based off of what he'd seen in that opening 30 minutes. I think he saw that. I think you then see Hearts never really look back after they get that goal, albeit the goal was a bit fortuitous in terms of how it comes about. But second half, we were great in that game. And that was a game where we controlled the game a little bit better than maybe we have done in previous weeks. We fully deserved the second goal. I think a little bit more care in the final third. I think we would have had more opportunities to get a third goal. And the only blemish on it's really losing a late goal. But even that, there wasn't a lot we could do about it. It was just one of those
Oh,
occasions where
Frankie
the
Kent could have just headed it away or booted it clear.
yeah, but he's got a 50p head, so we know that
Okay.
that's difficult for Frankie. So yeah, I'll not put too much on them for that. I'll put an A minus on that. That was a really good performance and a really good away performance.
That was reminiscent for me of when we went there and won by 2 goals to 0. And you just thought, this is what it feels like to be comfortable in a game in Glasgow. I'm giving that an A. I thought it was outstanding. Yeah, the first 10, 15 minutes was a bit shaky, but it's how we reacted to that. And then around the time of the goal and then what we did after the goal, I thought we were outstanding. An A for that. Falkirk nil, Hearts 2.
Yeah, a B plus. I thought that was a really professional performance. Again, a team that we knew would be quite comfortable on the ball, so we knew where those pressure points were going to come. We were good in transition. Bit similar to Celtic, we're a bit more care in the final third, particularly in the second half. I think we'd had a few more opportunities on the counter attack, but we defended really well, I felt, in that game. Didn't give Falkirk a lot of opportunities. We took our 2 goals really well. And yeah, just a really again, one of those performances that makes you think we're in it for the long haul. A really sort of competent away performance against what's ultimately been quite a sticky opponent for the majority of other
Mhm.
teams in the league so far this season.
B plus for me as well. A plus for game management. Getting the goal early and then getting the second goal when we did outstanding. So a B plus for performance. Hearts 2, Rangers 1.
B plus.
It's a long time
So
you took.
opening 20 minutes, we struggled a little bit to get in the game opening 20 minutes. And it wasn't the sort of opening 20 that I was expecting to see from Hearts in that type of fixture. Again, what we've done really well, and this is where McIntosh has to take credit, is he makes just the odd little subtle tweak just to help the midfield and just help us press the game a bit better up in that final third. Similar to Celtic, once we get that first goal, we never look back. But I think the reason why it doesn't go into that A category is because of just how wasteful we were in front of goal. And that was a game where we should have been feeling more comfortable going into the last 20, 30 minutes of that match rather than thinking if Rangers nick something here, they could be back in the game. So I think because of that, I have to downmark them slightly, which maybe is a little bit harsh, but still a really good performance.
A for me. It could easily have been more than it was. I mean, how it ended up being just a 1 goal victory, I don't know. Again, it was similar to the Celtic game, and I gave that an A after a sticky first 10, 15 minutes. Dominance. So A for me. Now, the Edinburgh Derby, Hibernian 3, Hearts 2.
Well, this is a difficult one because
It's like
do
the
I go
Motherwell
down
game at home, isn't it?
well, do I go down the side of positivity and say that the last half an hour came from our desire to get back in the game, or do I look at the fact that Josh Mulligan
Yes,
doesn't pull the
for
ball back
4-0.
to Martin
Yeah.
Boyle and then comes off the park 2 minutes later? It's hard to. I think because we're a bit further removed from it now, we're a week further ahead, and obviously we've had the weekend we just have. I'm going to try and look at it from the glass half full perspective and say that that last 25 minutes to half an hour was all on us and nothing to do with Hibs. And I'll give them a D minus for that, but I feel like I'm being very generous, because that the more I think about that game, the more I think that could have been a 5 or 6. If Mulligan squares the ball to Boyle, I think that could have been another couple of goals in that game for Hibs. So I think just lick our wounds and be fortunate that we got the 2 goals back. And as I said at the time, I think that made it a bit easier for the players to shake off the disappointment in the run up to the Livi game.
We only played well in the last half hour because we had to, because we were so bad for the first hour or whatever it was. And I say so bad, and you look back and you think, oh, Hibs had so many chances. They didn't. I mean, it's one of these. If Shanklin scores his chance, which is a better chance for me than the opening Hibs goal, and the Hibs second goal, I think it was the header,
Yeah.
as everybody's favourite Stuart Lovell was saying, that's a bloody tough goal to score. You probably get that 1 out of every 10 if you're lucky. I wouldn't say we were rubbish in the game, but I just thought the manager got his selection wrong with the opportunity. Was it Megwa to play Kizaridis against him? And it was horrible. And I'm not having the last half hour made up for the first. It didn't. We lost the game. It's an Edinburgh Derby. It hurt, and a D for me. Finally, up to speed and up to date with Hearts 1, Livingston nil. Tale of two halves. This.
Oh, I'd go with a B minus for that because there's still positives to take for that second half, albeit it was more the positive of how we defended and came out of the game with a clean sheet. And again, I think we did restrict Livingston to 1 or 2 decent chances. It wasn't a game where they peppered our goal with shots and sort of half chances throughout that 45 minutes. I think it was more our inability to control the match and sort of kill it off from a possession standpoint that ultimately did us more than anything else in that second half. But the players still put the effort in, and I'll give them a B minus for that because the first half was really good. The first half was where some of those players are at the peak of their powers. And again, if 1 or 2 of those chances fall to Lawrence Shanklin in terms of some of the other guys, then I think we would have been a bit more ahead at half time and it would have been an easier second half for us.
Purely based on performance, because that's what we're marking on and not finishing. It's an A plus for the first half and a C minus for the second half, which for me is a B overall. So we're up to date, 20 games now marked by Scott and I, 18 league games to go. Hearts have a 6 point lead at the top of the Scottish Premiership. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. Okay, let's wrap this one up. It's a very different Dundee side that Hearts will face from the last time, where they were absolutely insipid, coming to Tynecastle after Hearts had dropped 2 points or gained a point at St Mirren. Is your glass half empty or half full? Hearts won by 4 goals to 0. It was the most comfortable victory of the season, but Dundee are different now because they've got a bit of momentum. So what's going to happen on Sunday, Scott?
Well, they've got a bit of momentum in terms of they've had a good runny form in terms of winning those last 3 matches. I still think it's got the makeup of a team that could be just as insipid as they were against us a couple of months ago. You've got to remember as well, one of the more creative outliers for the last month or so is not going to be available because he's a player that's contracted by our club. So there is that aspect to it as well. Yeah, I I am not overly concerned about Sunday. The only concern I've got is that I do think Dundee will sit in. They'll try and do what they've done to us, what they did to Celtic earlier on in the season. It will be a case of 10 men behind the ball and trying to hit us on the transition through the likes of Congreve and Murray. We've just got to be patient, and I think we'll be fine. It's a game where I can see us winning 2 or 3-0. I do think it should be a comfortable game. And although Dundee will have their plaudits for how they've performed over the last few weeks, I still don't think their overall philosophy has changed much under Presley. They've just been a little bit more effective in doing so. But I still think coming up against us, I still think we should have too much for them.
If you watched the second half, or if anybody watched the second half of the Dundee Derby, I mean, it was backs to the wall, protect what they have, and Dundee United were all over them and ultimately couldn't get the goal. I just wonder what Bert Esselink has on Jim Goodwin, because he keeps playing in that first half against Celtic and the first half against Dundee, absolutely minging, but he still gets picked, and Dundee exploited that. So 2 or 3, what are you going for out of the two
I'll
you
go with
mentioned?
2.
Okay, scorer.
Shankland will get a goal, of course he will.
Okay. I think it'll be a 1-0. I think we'll get a clean sheet this weekend and we'll come back with all 3 points. I don't even know when Rangers or Celtic are playing. I don't even care because
Rangers
Hearts are
play
in
Aberdeen on the Sunday,
and they play this
so they
midweek
play
as well, don't
Aberdeen the
they?
same. But I think their game's earlier than ours. I think
But you know
potentially.
what? Hearts have got this in
Celtic
their
are
own
Saturday.
hands. If Hearts win all their games, they're champions. And to be in a position, and that's unlikely to happen, but to be in a position whereby you know that you take care of business and the title is yours is a phenomenal position to be in. And if we can replicate our first half display against Livingston, albeit I don't know who of the Dundee players is going to try and attempt an own goal from a diving header, like our buddy Ryan McGowan. But if we take care of business and perform well, then I think we'll win this game and hopefully pretty comfortably. But you know what? If it's nervy right until the end and we come away with 3 points, like we did at the weekend, I will take it. So Hearts to win by 1-0. I need a goal scorer, Kizaridis, who will cut inside onto his right foot and score from around the edge of the box at the end where the sold out signs are up and the Hearts supporters can celebrate. My thanks to Ryan McGowan for his time for joining us earlier. Difficult one for him losing at the weekend, but he still made time for us. My thanks to Scott McIntosh, and Stuart Lovell will not be back on Scarves Around the Funnel. I'm sure you're all delighted about that. Thank you to you for watching and for listening. We shall be back to review Dundee Hearts at the start of next week. Bye for now.